Hello, thank you for joining us, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Ambrose McNevin. I am the Editor-in-Chief at Computer Business Review, and I will be your host. It is our pleasure to have HP with us today to discuss Windows Server 2003 migration. We've got two great speakers, the Head of Data Center Cloud and Storage Consulting and the Worldwide Director for Data Center Platforms Consulting. And I will fully introduce these speakers presently. But first, the running order. We do have a packed program. So the running order after you hear from me will be an introduction to the topic, a poll, which we hope you will take part in. We're going to the main presentation, which also includes a second poll, and then a Q&A at the end for about 10 or 15 minutes, where you get a chance to put your questions to today's speakers. For those of you who are unfamiliar, first I would like to take you through some housekeeping points. We are using the webinar platform On24. You'll notice that this webinar is browser-based, so if you disconnect, please click on the link that you received via the email to rejoin. I mentioned the Q&A. In order to ask questions, you can send them via the Q&A widget at the bottom of your screen, or use the questions box at the top left-hand corner of your screen. We will have about 10 or 15 minutes at the end of the session to address any questions or thoughts that you may have. Please remember, you can submit questions at any time during today's webcast. If you click on the green resource list widget, you will find 3 PDFs from today's speakers, which you can view or you can download. And if you'd please also use the yellow help widget if you require any assistance. You can move, resize, maximize any of the windows in front of you. So hopefully that will help you enjoy today's webcast. So to the introductions, I'm delighted to introduce Andrew Dutton, who is the Head of Data Center Cloud and Storage Consulting, and Andrew is going to introduce today's topic. And then for the main presentation, we will hear from Craig Partridge. Craig is Worldwide Director, Data Center Platforms Consulting at HP. So I will be back for the polls and for the Q&A session at the end. But for now, I'll be delighted to hand over to Andrew to introduce today's discussion topic.
Thank you, Ambrose. And firstly, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for taking the time to join this webinar. Hopefully you will find it insightful. We're going to cover a number of different areas. Craig's going to delve in a little bit more deeply around the challenge that people are facing, and some of the things that we need to be considering as we undertake a level of transformational change around your legacy operating systems, legacy infrastructure, the implications and decisions that you'll need to take when considering such a change. So what does this mean? So Windows Server 2003 end of life. So as I'm sure many of you all know, Microsoft have announced that they will be going end of life on their Windows 2003 operating system on July 14, 2015. What does this mean? So Microsoft will no longer provide automatic fixes, updates, or online technical support. So let me just elaborate on that a little bit more. So what does that mean? No updates. Well, let's put that in context. In 2013, Microsoft released 37 critical updates for their Windows 2003 R2 platform, which was under extended support. What that actually means now is there's going to be no updates will be developed or released after that end of support. So what does that introduce? Well, clearly it introduces issues and concerns around compliance, introduces risk from a security point of view, and opens the opportunity for critical vulnerabilities that could have devastating impacts on your business. There are other various regulatory issues and standards that may no longer be achieved. A good example of that is payment card industry, so PCI data security standards, which basically means if you're running business applications on a 2003 platform for Visa and MasterCard, then there's a potential that you will no longer be supported or able to do business. So in effect, there is no safe haven. Both virtualized and physical instances of 2003 are going to be vulnerable. There is a risk that you won't pass a compliance audit. In our opinion, I think staying put will end up costing more in the end. So I think by deferring the problem, not acting now, will actually introduce more complexity, ultimately take more time, and obviously cost more than thinking about how do you align to your ongoing IT strategy and how do you make the right decisions here and now, and then moving forward with a migration plan that you can execute against. Many applications will cease to be supported. Once the operating systems are running, potential they're also going to be unsupported. This also includes Microsoft applications. So really, the time to act is now. So we need to be thinking about what does that mean. I need to be thinking about starting that migration planning process now. When we talk to a number of customers, and I've spoken to a number of customers in recent weeks around this very subject, a lot of the challenges they face is simply around not knowing what you have. And that has been quite a big challenge for a lot of people, not knowing how many operating systems they have, what the applications are running, what do the servers and applications talk to. One of the things that we talk about is this disconnect between IT and the line of business, the application owners. It is imperative, in our opinion, to make sure you've got application owner engagement. That is critical. I think also to recognise this isn't a workload migration. Isn't an operating system upgrade. Who owns the applications? What mandate do they have to enforce the change? And who owns the risk and cost of unsupportability? In our opinion, don't just do like for like. This is a point of inflection. Think about what your technology strategy is and align to it accordingly. There's another couple of compelling things. On January 23rd, 2014, as many of you know, IBM confirmed its plans to sell their x86 business to Lenovo. HP have been working very strong in collaboration with Microsoft, and we're working and talking to a number of organizations and enterprises to ultimately enable them to move onto a supported platform, be it 2008, 2012, R2, and we are absolutely investing in the future of the x86 business. So Ambrose, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. So that's some wonderful context there for today's discussion topic. So we're going to go straight into our first poll. So you'll see the question on your screen there, which I will read. So please do take part in this poll. We will serve the results to you immediately and come back to Andrew for some comment. So the question is, what is your plan for moving off Windows Server 2003? As you can see, we have 5 options. Not migrated yet, but plan to within 1 year. Not migrated yet, but plan to with no set time frame. No plans to move to Windows Server 2012. Or currently engaged with an IT partner on this project, or already migrated to Windows Server 2012. If you could submit your answers now, and Andrew, what is your view on this question? Can you just give us some comment?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Like I said, we've been talking to a lot of organisations. There's actually no right or wrong answer here. There's a lot of organisations that are at varying stages. There are a lot of organisations that are looking to try and migrate as many instances, applications off an unsupported platform by July. There's a lot of organisations that have actually realised that they will not hit that deadline, and they're aligning to what their future IT strategy and direction is. They are considering to take out the custom support agreement with Microsoft to effectively give them some time and mitigate some of that risk. But ultimately, the time to act is now. A lot of organisations are looking at how they address this problem. It's at varying different stages with a lot of customers.
I see. Thank you, Andrew. So I think we'll just go straight to the results now and see how. Okay, so it's a fairly even split, as you can see, and if that reflects your what you're seeing in the market, Andrew.
I think it is very much so. I don't think that we've actually spoken to any customer that's actually migrated off 2003. Every customer is concerned about it. We're looking at engaging at different levels with organisations, simply helping them define their strategy, helping them to think about and categorise their applications in terms of criticality and compatibility. But the discovery phase, which Craig will go into, is the key step on that journey.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Andrew. So that's great. Now we're going to go into the main part of the presentation. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Craig Partridge, who is a worldwide director for data center platforms consulting. Craig is going to do, as I said, the main deep dive into the presentation. During Craig's presentation, we will have another poll, and then Craig will take us all the way into the Q&A after that at the end of the session. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Craig.
Great stuff. Thank you, Ambrose, and thanks, Andrew, for a great context to the challenge here. So as we described, I'm the worldwide director for our platforms consulting business. It's the side of our consulting business which cares passionately about helping customers overcome this hurdle over the coming months. Just to briefly orientate you around EG Consulting, so our portfolio consists of a number of areas: data center consulting, mobility and networking for those looking for productivity solutions for the workforce, big data and storage for those looking to get new insights from data, and our education services there to support customers upskilling and managing that change cycle. Those are organized in order to deliver 4 key outcomes. We're helping customers to create the next generation on-demand infrastructure, to enable that productive workplace, to deliver the data-driven enterprise, and also to secure their digital assets. And I'll touch on some of those points as we go through. So the part of the organization that cares about this conversation is data center consulting, and in fact that's the part of the organization which I help to run on a worldwide basis. The data center consulting business actually constitutes 3 key pillars. We look after helping to design, commission, and optimize data center facilities, so the actual building, power and cooling side of the data center. The platforms piece, which is the piece that hosts this particular debate with our customers, and we have a business geared up around helping customers become that strategic broker in the cloud debate as well. So that's just a little bit of an introduction to the consulting business and where this particular conversation is hosted and driven from. So let's go into the conversation. So I wanted to make sure that we don't jump into this conversation without recognizing where most customers are, because you're looking after a very complex landscape. You're looking after a multi-vendor hybrid landscape made up of business-critical workloads, back-office workloads. You're doing it across a range of different equipment, some of it very modern, some of it N-1, N-2 revisions. It's enormously difficult to secure that environment, and it's proving a real challenge to manage it in a seamless way as well. And of course, the title of this presentation was Windows Server 2003, Another Compelling Event. There are multiple compelling events that are all happening at the same time. I'll reference a couple of them as we go through, but HP calls that the new style of IT. And this culmination of effects from cloud and mobility, social, Internet of Things, is driving a tremendous amount of change. And just at that same time, Windows Server 2003 goes end of life. And we think the 2 things can be linked quite nicely. So within our portfolio, addressing that complexity state, we have a practice geared up around this modernization agenda. firmly believe that the Windows Server 2003 program is driven from a modernization perspective. In other words, a modernization agenda from our point of view is all about helping customers to remove risk. Certainly customers are running platforms which continue to be strategic for them going forward, whether that's continuing to invest in x86 as a platform, continuing to invest in Windows Server operating system as a platform, but customers still maximizing and leveraging the life span of installations to date. And that's proving to increase the risk in multiple vectors for customers. So our modernized agenda is all about risk. This particular conversation sits in our workload modernization portfolio. And I think actually one of the biggest myths about the Windows Server 2003 end-of-life support is it draws your attention to the word server, and it almost suggests that this can be accomplished by simply upgrading or moving up the server OS revision stack. Of course, the reason it sits in workload modernization from our perspective is because although this problem is triggered by the end of life of an operating system, it is in fact almost nothing to do with modernizing the operating system. This is all about the workload. And where our customers are stuck is not because they can't implement or instantiate new editions of the Windows Server operating system. It's because the application and the workloads that are running on Windows Server 2003 are unknown, unquantified, and potentially incompatible with that future state. Of course, Windows Server 2003 is able to deliver on a couple of fronts. It's certainly able to be a great platform for hosting applications, and a large focus of the attention will be how those applications perform and respond in a modernized Windows environment. But equally, of course, consider that Windows Server 2003, as it has from Windows Server 2000 onwards, has many infrastructure roles as well. So whether that be as a domain controller or as a file server or a print server, a DNS server, many of these infrastructure roles are again hand in hand with the deployment of Windows Server. So when we say workload, we don't just mean application, of course. We mean getting a full inventory of all of the features and functions that Windows Server 2003 is offering at your environment today. And that will be across both application and infrastructure. And of course, the other key thing, which is, I guess, rather stating the obvious, is that the issue you have when measuring those workloads and deciding about the future state is that you now have a complexity of choice which possibly wasn't there or simply wasn't a choice when you were deploying Windows Server 2003 11 years ago. Nowadays, of course, your choice of destination doesn't just involve instantiating Windows Server 2012 R2 and moving application and infrastructure roles into that environment. For many workloads, new delivery models are going to be the choice of favor. And that includes building out private cloud platforms, as well as taking advantage of public cloud service offerings. And certainly the Microsoft Azure conversation will have to come in and play as part of this discussion, but also hybrid cloud outcomes as well. I guess the point here is that this is not simply an upgrade. There is anyway no supported path that exists between Server 2003 and Server 2012. And it is about getting the balance right between these alternative destinations. And once you understand those workloads and those infrastructure roles, to which destination choice are you going to design your strategy around when it comes to mitigating the risk that Windows Server 2003 presents? So the world's moved on, not only in the way we deliver services, but also in the way that we consume services. Just think how much of an evolution the end user has gone through in shifting towards becoming a consumer and demanding different device choices and different device formats compared to when you were deploying applications back in the Windows Server 2003 release cycles. So as we roll forward then, I think the Server 2003 modernization discussion then focuses on a couple of areas. The first thing to get right is to make sure that when you decide what your destination is ultimately going to be, you do that based on facts and quantitative data. And for many of our customers, actually getting this piece right is the most foundational building block of how to move forward. Categorizing and cataloging these workloads and these infrastructure roles to make sure that you've got a clear description of how Server 2003 is supporting your environment today is the key first step to be able to start doing the scenario planning and the modeling to decide what that future state is going to look and feel like. Of course, there's multiple tools out there to help you do that. This can be very much eased and fast-tracked through the use of software and automation in this discovery and assessment and planning phase. For many of you, I suppose the Microsoft Map Toolkit would be very familiar, certainly something very readily available from Microsoft. But whereas that provides good information on instances, server counts, physical, virtual, operating system revisions, etc., one of the things that customers often ask us for is simply knowing the quantities is not enough. What they actually need to do is to be able to map dependencies and map workloads that sit above that operating system information. So how can you show me where workloads are pulling together instances in order to be able to provide the services that they're delivering to end users today? In HP, we use something called HP Universal Discovery alongside and augmented by this range of other tools to help us do exactly that, in fact, to start mapping the dependencies that exist in your estate today so that you can build up a full portfolio of when you talk about a workload, exactly what instances are really supporting the efforts around that workload. Of course, assess is just the first phase, but before we move on, let's take a quick poll and see if you really understand what you have today. So Ambrose, over to you.
Thank you, Craig. Yeah, that's a great time to move on to our second poll, which is really, as you say, looking at understanding what you have in your environment. So the question, how many instances of Windows, physical and virtual, do you run in your environment? It's a multiple choice of 4. We have fewer than 50, 50 to 100, 101 to 200, or greater than 200. So, Craig, while people are just considering their answers, you talked about gaining real insight into the state of your environment today. And can you just give us a comment on that? And what are you seeing in terms of the customers? How knowledgeable are they about the instances of Windows they have?
Yeah, thanks, Ambrose. So, I mean, as always, every customer is unique, and every customer has got a different level of quality of intelligence in terms of what's running in their estate. Remember, Server 2003 was launched 11 years ago. In many cases, some of these instances are running in the deepest, darkest corridors and corners of the enterprise today. So I wouldn't be surprised here if many of you on the call are hazarding a guess, frankly, as to which of those categories you think you might belong to. It certainly, although we say greater than 200, it sounds like quite a low threshold. We know customers that are running multiples more of 200. So if you find yourself in the category of greater than 200, by the way, you're in very good company. Let's put it that way at least. You're certainly not on your own. You're not unique. So with that, should we have a look at the results, Ambrose?
Yep. Thank you. Thanks, Craig. So yeah, well, that reflects what you've just said. That greater than 200 is well, exactly half of people who have answered the question. So yeah, so there clearly are large environments still out there, as you say, in the wild. One of my favorite poll questions of all time was, how many ghost servers do you have? Answer, I don't know, because they're ghost servers. But as you've alluded to, so that greater than 200 number is that this is clearly a major issue to address.
Yeah, it is, and I hope that's ultimately why people are spending and investing their time this afternoon on this call, and why we find ourselves so busy having this conversation and helping customers to navigate this challenge. So thanks, Ambrose. I'll move it to the next slide here. So looking then at that first stage, the critical stage of assessment, there's clearly a number of steps that go beyond that. Once we've got quantifiable data, once we can start to map that out, we then, within HP, we have a very structured approach to what we do with that data once we've done the workload assessment and the destination planning. We have a 3 follow-on stages, which include preparing a future state environment, because we are clearly going to be building, certainly if traditional or on-premise or private cloud is your destination of choice, going to be building out that parallel new infrastructure ready to start moving those workloads onto. So we want to do some deployment, but we also want to carry out some of those migration tests to assure that the routes to that future infrastructure are proven reliable, can be signed off and validated that they are achieving the outcome that we are looking for. We're certainly then going to go through a period, once that's signed off and we've got the business in alignment with what we're doing, we're then going to move into a migration phase. We spend a lot of our time helping customers with that PMO effort. There's a huge amount of effort in terms of scheduling and communicating to make sure that the change cycles and the release schedules for when we start moving workloads is handled with appropriate care, with due diligence, with the right communication to the business, as well as employing some of the migration tools that might be used throughout. We also want to make sure during that stage, by the way, that we have a validated recovery option. Many customers forget to make sure that should that change not occur in the right way, that there's a need to have a plotted path back to the source environment. Also another reason why a future parallel infrastructure is a preferred option for us. And then finally, we're going to make sure that we transition over to the customer in the appropriate way, that the support processes have been documented, that the old environments have been decommissioned. That's where the return on the investment is when moving away from Windows Server 2003 into this bright new world. Just want to highlight a couple of things. From a product point of view in HP, we have a converged system, 700X, specifically designed, engineered and tested and integrated with Microsoft to deliver you what we believe is a best-in-class starter from a Microsoft private cloud point of view. For those interested in looking at on-premise or private cloud options for the future target, looking at something like the converged system 700X for Windows would be, I think, a great consideration to make when looking at those future destinations. So just to dwell into those or dive into those 4 areas a little bit deeper, we kind of covered some of the areas in a high level. One of the things I just wanted to point out is that during that assessment phase, one of the things we're going to be looking at is the application or the workloads supportability in a future state, whatever that future state choice is, whether that be on-premise, private, Azure, or hybrid. And many customers are asking us, okay, so what happens when these applications, for whatever reason, are not going to seamlessly move? And that's a very common question. There are, in fact, a number of different categories that your applications can fall into as part of that assess phase, and of course something we'll look to test in the preparation phase. It could mean that the application can simply be rehosted. In other words, it's compatible with a modern Windows Server variant going forward, and we can instantiate it in the new environment and make those tests and ensure supportability. But for many customers, sometimes there are harder choices that need to be made. One of those could be the need to absolutely rewrite or rebuild the application, and that means getting your hands dirty with the source code, which was originally there to design that application in the first place. At HP, we have an apps mod capability to help customers that no longer have the skills maintained to be able to do that. So rebuild is refactoring an application, which means that some remediation might be required. It might be a multi-tier application and there's component parts that need to be upgraded, but we'll certainly help customers make those component changes or the remediation efforts required around applications if we can in fact get it to a supported state. It may be, in fact, that customers need to make the hard choice about retiring or entirely replacing the application. It might be that the application can now better be sourced from a public cloud provider. HP ourselves have made those choices in the past, looked towards the cloud to answer certain workload scenarios rather than continuing to try to maintain a system on a legacy operating system. And for those few instances where none of those options seem viable, we are working with partners such as AppZero to help you containerize the application and move it over probably will end up in an unsupported outcome. However, it will give you the breathing space to be able to remove that Windows Server 2003 instance and containerize that app and have that running on a supported OS variant. So there's a number of options, and all of those will be gone through with you as we go through that assess and prepare stage, and then as we go through migration, we'll be testing that before we cut over. So just to highlight a couple of the options that exist when looking at this problem statement. I think the first thing to be clear about is, and I think Andrew alluded to it very well up front, which is this doing nothing is simply not an option. We have seen customers say, we know we're going to run over, we know we're going to go past July 14. That's a deliberate strategy, even though we're aware of the risk profile associated with it. I think for some customers, the risk profile is simply not sustainable, and the need to move and the need to move urgently is now quite a compelling event. As Andrew said at the beginning, that risk profile is not going away anytime soon. Regulatory issues like FDA or PCI require platforms to be moved up. Cost, I think, is an enormous impact here. Those custom support agreements from Microsoft are going to get exponentially expensive, and they're not a typical go-to answer when looking at Windows Server 2003 in environments today. In fact, I think the cost of the CSA in many cases might be reduced by spending that money instead on the migration effort and the modernization effort that you've got. I hope we've also made the point that you can take this as the advantage to start to look at infrastructure modernization as well as just looking at the application or the workload modernization agenda which is attached to this Windows Server 2003 issue. As we said, there's no direct upgrade path, so there's a complexity in remaining where you are, particularly from that x86 architecture. So the need to address applications as well as the operating system, and again, I think we've covered that to some degree here. And of course, one of the other things you won't be able to do is to start to exploit some of the benefits and some of the features that the modern platform of choice can bring to you, whether that be the speed, efficiency, and scale or power footprint reduction of a modern x86 platform, or indeed the feature sets that are now available and the density and the virtual machine capabilities that are available in a modern Windows operating system. So not being able to tap into those features is also part of that risk of doing nothing. For most of our customers, though, there's still lots of key questions. What will Windows Server 2000 allow me to do? Will my applications, in fact, work in that environment? How will my applications be impacted? Do I have support agreements if I start to move my workloads across? How do I keep all of the drivers and the firmwares and the software patches up to date and current as I go through the move? What's the impacts of making incremental changes to the patching and to the version revisions of my applications as I go? Customers are certainly looking for the fastest and most risk-free way to move to Server 2012, and I think we've made the point that that starts with getting good quantitative data up front in that early assessment phase. But they're also they want to make sure that from an infrastructure perspective, that the entire infrastructure and the data center is supported as well. And so it is part of a wider ecosystem. In fact, I'll come back to this being part of a wider ecosystem through the second half of this presentation here. But people is a big issue, people and organization. If you've still got skills and if you're still supporting legacy environments, there is an impact and an uplift required, not just from an infrastructure perspective, not just from a workload or application modernization perspective, but also think about reskilling and retraining the people in your organization that will be supporting that end state. We believe we've got some answers to those questions, and I'll happily just take you through a couple of them as we go through. So planning considerations, quick summary, keep these in mind when you're going through the planning stages for Windows Server 2003 modernization. Certainly think about new hardware. So use this as a chance to deliver infrastructure modernization as well as workload modernization, and look again at your service delivery options. Look at the new levels of virtualization and consolidation which might be available to you now, which could deliver a much bigger ROI than the current virtualization or consolidation levels that you're achieving in today's legacy environment. Again, making the jump from old to new brings with it many benefits, which include greater levels of virtualization and consolidation that previously weren't applicable. That compliance issue is huge. Make sure that if you're going to continue to run Server 2003 beyond the July timeframe, that you know where you stand from a compliance perspective, and also make sure that your Chief Security Officer is aware of that risk that you're taking as you go beyond July. Those security officers being a big advocate and a good change agent for helping you get these programs underway and completed. Again, we've talked about applications and the need to understand the application estate and get the inventory right, and make sure that you use that data to map together workloads in a service model as opposed to just the physical instance count. This isn't just an operating system issue. Again, it's that workload issue. Use it as a chance to look again at how you manage the environment. Many customers aren't just looking at this from an application or workload perspective, but they're saying, well, in that future state, I should be able to manage the environment more seamlessly. I can take the chance to invest again in management platforms such as SCCM in my new environment. I can take the chance to look again at converged management at the infrastructure layer to get greater efficiencies out of the hardware as well. So management and the management functions which will underpin that future state, again, they can be part of that modernization agenda. We mentioned people skills and governance, critical to get those skills uplifted, critical to get the governance models right. That future state, certainly if you're going to start looking at cloud and public cloud and private and hybrid models, that's going to start to change the governance and operational models. And again, coming from a traditional on-premise Windows Server 2003 instance into this hybrid landscape is going to require an uplift in the way that you govern and operate IT, and that's another impact to consider. Also, look at investment options. I think one of the great services that HP bring to the market is through HP Financial Services, we can help customers structure this modernization effort in a way which helps with the business case. So getting the financial gearing right around how to invest in this modernization agenda and using HP's Financial Services as a way of helping you to reduce the impact of the overall cost and to use financial modeling to help you get there in a different, potentially in a way that you haven't thought of before, is a bit of a hidden secret and something that I absolutely want you guys on the call to be aware of. We are there to help not just from a consultancy and engagement and PMO perspective, but also from a financial perspective as well. So we have a number of clear services which align to each of those different stages. I won't go through all of them, but there are services designed to help you at every stage. One thing I just wanted to highlight, and that was the early engagement, the transformation workshop for Windows Server 2003 migration. The reason I wanted to highlight that is because for many of our customers, it's really a question about how do I get started? How do I organize my teams? How do I think about those future states? How do I make strategic decisions about what that destination is going to look like? How do I start around the assessment phase? What impacts will my choices have in operations, in security, in governance? So how do we bring all those parties together to discuss the workload issue, which is at the heart of the Windows Server 2003 challenge, and how do we create a joint program in which everybody is signed up and understands what we're trying to achieve? Because this is a modernization agenda beyond just the Windows Server. As we said, it's an infrastructure modernization. It could be a service delivery modernization. It's certainly a workload modernization. These are very interactive, highly good fun, and use real life-size panels. This isn't PowerPoint by def. This is getting people in a room on their feet, engaging in the material, engaging in the conversation to create yourselves a cleared roadmap of how you move forward. So I sort of position the Windows Server 2003 program as belonging to our Modernize agenda. We actually have a platform modernization agenda as well. The reason I wanted to highlight that is because we said that this is your chance not just to look at workload and workload modernization, but if nothing else, it's also the chance to look at infrastructure modernization as well. And so as you look across those workloads, also make the decision, if you're going to be on-premise or with private cloud, what the right compute solution is that will underpin that. And within HP, we've of course got this broad range from specialist compute through our converged systems, which are those workload-optimized, pre-engineered, pre-tested environments, into that industrialized, industry-standard compute arena, all the way up into this high-performance arena as well. So getting the right compute aligned to the right workload, but making sure you do it at the right economics is also what we care passionately about as well. And I think the Windows Server 2003 agenda, since it's not just about the infrastructure and the workload, but it's about bringing those together at the right economics, it absolutely plays into what we can deliver from a platform modernization perspective. Of course, in that middle section around those converged systems and the industrialized x86 ISS environments, you're going to continue to work with, and in fact we do within HP Consulting work with these partners, VMware, if you're running this across ESX and moving it up into infrastructure as a service. Of course with Microsoft around Hyper-V and System Center and getting that hybrid experience out to Azure, and even for those customers that are looking for open choices as they go forward as being the strategic platform for their workloads to migrate onto. We do work certainly around OpenStack. As you know, HP Helion is our brand for everything we do around our cloud environments, and that includes our OpenStack professional services. So no matter which hypervisor or abstraction layer you're looking to choose in that future state, we think we can help you move those workloads in the appropriate way. Just to close and conclude, the Modernize agenda is clearly in focus here, but we also have the availability to help customers with a Migrate agenda, and we've got now mission-critical x86 platforms. We mentioned it before in Superdome X. If you're looking to move off proprietary platforms onto this industry-standard x86 environment, come and speak to us about how we can help you with that, and also how we can help you move those data platforms into this world of the data-driven enterprise, real-time analytics, highly scalable in-memory databases, whether that be taking advantage of things like the Microsoft Analytics platform or even our converged system around SAP HANA as well. So some of the workloads that you're currently running on Windows Server 2003 may actually be candidates for looking at different ways of deploying those platform services as we go forward. And I just wanted to highlight our capabilities there. Certainly, as you look at the infrastructure modernization agenda, we believe that's going to shift you into an era of convergence. And although HP created the nomenclature of converged infrastructure back in 2009, we still see customers struggling with the impact of convergence. And a couple of reasons for that, and we've mentioned them already. Convergence isn't just a technology, although it is the convergence ultimately of compute and store and networking and management. It is also making the necessary organizational changes and the necessary process changes, and we've mentioned both of those so far on this call as being key parts of how you really leverage a modernized infrastructure by aligning the organization and the people and the governance and the IT processes and the way that you automate in that new environment as well. And again, our focus is around helping customers to maximize that outcome as well. The final thing I'll say is that the world hasn't stopped at convergence. There's clearly a new horizon. That goes beyond where convergence has got us to. And beyond that, we see this world arising around software-defined and the software-defined infrastructure. And ultimately, as you move these workloads and you look at infrastructure modernization as part of your Windows Server 2003 migrations, you're going to come up with, well, what should that future infrastructure really look like? And we believe that's one in which the infrastructure is much more able to adapt to the kind of applications that you're going to be running. In other words, getting the infrastructure and the applications more closely together, having the applications, giving the applications the ability to directly control and influence the way that compute and store and networking come together to build those infrastructure blocks for your workloads. We think that's the journey to the new style of IT. But to get there, there's also a couple of compelling things that you need to look at. When we look at SDI, or software-defined infrastructure, a quick plug from myself, we have just launched 3 new services around software-defined infrastructure. We think this is a great way of you getting engaged in how to design that future data center in a way which brings that agility and flexibility to the infrastructure, moving up to an open and exposed control plane, which your workloads will now be able to start taking advantage of. And that can be traditional workloads as well as these emerging new workloads, which might be the outcome of some of this application modernization, this rewriting of code, which may need to happen for some of the workloads locked away in that historical environment today. I mentioned at the same time that customers care passionately about making sure that future state is secure. I have a portfolio designed specifically to deal with that as your choice of destination now includes not just on-premise and private, but potentially public and hybrid. As you start to become that strategic broker, getting the security model right, getting IP protected in that environment, getting authentication and identity and access control right is also going to be a key consideration. And again, we've built services and solutions to help customers create that security mindset in that future state. And finally, we mentioned it as well that you could use the Server 2003 program as a way of upgrading and investing again in management and automation solutions so that in that future state, your future environment is able to run at a much more efficient, more automated state as well. So I mentioned the strategic workshops that we have. The Windows Server 2003 workshop is a great example of how you can step back from the coalface, work with experienced people within HP to help you guide you through that journey. We believe being able to step back from that coalface, have that strategic discussion is going to be key in aligning all of the resources required to make this leap off Windows Server 2003 as we go forward. That's how my portfolio is structured, and that's how we bring to bear everything we can do to help customers to navigate this journey beyond Windows Server 2003 into the data center of the future. Of course, we do it not because we're just interested in technology, but we're after helping customers increase the ability and the speed in which they can deploy and deliver new services. We believe it's about helping customers to create a much more hyper-connected workforce, not just internally between your partners and data, to get new insights from these real-time analytics platforms, and to make sure that environment's always secured. So I tailed the presentation by just giving you a quick overview of some of the extended areas that the portfolio covers and how we can help you on a broader basis. And I think that's a great ending because actually that's the beginning of the message, and I hope that the front and the back hang together. This is going to not just require an operating system upgrade. It's going to ask you to reconsider how you deliver workloads and services today. And so the broadest possible picture about where workloads reside in the future, how to design that, is going to be of absolute key consideration. So I hope with this we've given you some clues as to the way we approach it. And with that, Ambrose, and with 10 minutes left, we'll hand it back to yourself and we can conclude and maybe move into the Q&A.
Fantastic. Thank you, Craig. Yeah, really a wonderful journey there through the challenges from assessment, from understanding where you are now, through the opportunities, through the solution portfolio from HP, but also, as you said, through the roadmap and seeing this as an opportunity really to understand how your environments can be made future-proof, take advantage of the modern technologies, delivery platforms, as you said, everything from all types of cloud platforms, no matter where you want to host your workloads and your environment. So we do have just a few minutes left for a Q&A. So I'm going to jump straight in with the first question. I don't know, Craig, you've spoken for quite a bit. I don't know if you want Andrew to pick this up. But first question we've had in is, what do I upgrade to? We know where we're coming from, but where are we going?
Yeah, no, good question, and thanks, Ambrose. So I think for me, it really depends on what you want to upgrade to. At some point in the past year, Windows Server 2003 was selected as that appropriate technology, which you heard Craig allude to host a number of different business applications. But I think the reality is in 2015 there are going to be other options available to you. Lots of customers are looking at migrating local exchange and link, for example, to a public cloud offering such as Microsoft Azure and Office 365. We think about other things that we can consume as a service. So I'll give you a real life example. HP made a decision to deploy a new CRM system, Salesforce.com. We are consuming that as an organization as a service, but we are doing it, and we're only really enabled to do that by effectively having a modern operating system, single source logon, etc. Or there's other things such as Microsoft Dynamics 365 can be an option. So I think consider there are maybe better options, better products than maybe the solution that you've got today. So I would absolutely encourage people to be thinking along those lines.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah, and I just jump in as well, Ambrose. Yeah, no, so I think, again, just reiterate the point. Remember, this is not an upgrade. I mean, the question is a good one. It's well framed. What do I upgrade to? Because there's a plethora of choices there. But just remember, in that question, the word upgrade isn't applicable. There is no upgrade path from Server 2003 to a fully supported Windows Server 2012 R2. So it's going to be the hard decisions. It is going to be understanding the applications, picking that new destination, and then going through the options of rehosting, rewriting, maybe even using containerization solutions to be able to get you there. So it's the burning question. So I get why it's number one, but a straightforward upgrade answer isn't applicable either here.
Thank you, Craig. So just a reminder to our attendees, in order to ask the questions, you can send them via the Q&A widget at the bottom of your screen, or use the questions box at the top left-hand corner of your screen. I do have another question here. Can you just run through some of the key challenges for a Windows 2003 end-of-life project?
Can I take that one, Andrew?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
And the reason is, so I think we gave 7 things to consider when you're looking at going through the program of moving off Server 2003. I'll just reinforce the one thing that you absolutely need to get right in terms of key challenges, and that's just understanding what you have. Many of you gave the answer that you had in excess of 200 instances of Windows Server 2003. Now that's looking at it from a physical instance perspective, but if we were to ask you, do you know what workloads are running to what service level and to what business criticality on Windows Server 2003? For many customers, actually that answer is a much more difficult one to give, because it's much less clear how the server instance count, both physical and virtual, map into that bigger dilemma. So the reason we use technologies like HP Universal Discovery is to be able to start doing that service mapping, which starts to then make sense of the instance count that you're seeing, both physical and virtual, as I said. So we left you with the 7 top tips to think about, but if there's one thing you need to get right, or the one biggest challenge, it's what have you got today, and what software is deployed on it, and what business services does that landscape support today? That's the challenge our customers have. That's the biggest one they have.
Thank you. I've got quite an involved question in several parts, so I'm going to jump straight in. The question is, I have no knowledge of my systems, what they talk to, what infrastructure and application software is installed, and what it talks to. So where do I start?
Do you want to just pick up where you left off, Craig? I guess one of the things that Craig talked to at the outset was the importance of knowing just what you've got. We talked around the steps that we go through as part of the migration, and one of those is the assessment piece. And we talked about the different types of products and tools that we have, products like Microsoft Map, HP University Discover, and other supplementary products that we can use to augment that discovery. We're engaged with a number of customers at a number of different levels, and Microsoft Map might give you all the information you need. You might need to have a more in-depth topology, so being able to understand the interconnections and what's talking to what from an application to server level. For me, a lot of customers that we're talking to have already started some of this journey. They've already got a good line of sight and visibility of what they've got in their estates, and there's other things that organizations such as HP, we can support you in undertaking effectively a gap analysis. So looking at what you have, looking at what information you would need to have, connecting the dots between IT and the application owners, be it whether that's in-house or other external organizations that you may have out-tasked some of the apps development work to, or even some of those apps organizations where potentially there isn't that level of connectivity now or support, and then we can be considering what other options you have. Not only as part of the discovery, we're trying to assess what you have, but we're also trying to categorize those applications and workloads into criticality. And the other thing that we're looking at is what we can do around compatibility. So what has the ability to migrate to the more modern operating system, be it 2008, 2012, and then to what Craig talked about around application recoding, etc., etc. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, Craig.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. And the only thing I would extend it with is just keeping this real as well. Software will get you so far. I certainly don't want you leaving the call believing that HP's answer is that everything can be automated in terms of data collection. One of the things that we always have to make sure we take care to is getting the personal connections, the application owners, the lines of business owners that run those applications, to make sure that we are clear about who the stakeholders and the owners are of these workloads, because we can't automate our way out of Windows Server 2003. There are going to be those human interactions and those moments of connection which are just as valuable and give just as much insight as what we can do from a software perspective as well. That's why I really believe this is a program of work. It's not something that we can sort of sit back in the data center and drive with a GUI and a mouse. So I just think that's another key point.
Thank you, Craig. I have a final question for you, which is that we understand end of life for an operating system. Just characterize in terms of what you see as the risks of doing nothing versus the benefits of actually starting to address this issue. Everyone understands the operating system is not going to stop working kind of come the end of life date, but talk to me about the risks of doing nothing and then the benefits of actually engaging with this ahead of time.
I think you've got a great way of summarizing this, Andrew, in terms of not doing anything.
Yeah. It's an interesting point. I think for me, there isn't an option to not do anything. I think for me, I alluded to it at the outset. I think you're just deferring the problem. There's a number of things when we've talked to organisations. Well, what to the point you just made, Ambrose, and the question. This is an operating system that I've run for 10 years, and it hasn't really failed. Yes, there's been some critical updates, etc., etc. But what if I can manage by I have a failure, I can spin up a new server, virtualize the OS, etc., etc. I've sort of mitigated the problem. Well, you have to a degree, but you're only just sort of patching the issue. For me, what you're doing is missing the opportunity to and the ability to align to what your longevity, your IT strategy is going to be. You're potentially putting at risk, and deferring the problem in terms of time, complexity, and cost. And you also, depending on what industry you are, you could be, limiting your ability to drive innovation, and the services that you provide to your business, the services that you provide to your customers, the agility that you want to create, they're all things that you will be limited by not actually thinking about your strategy to migrate to a modern operating platform. HP is a great example. As I said, we've deployed Salesforce.com globally. We would not have been able to do that on a legacy operating system. So it's not just about the risk of doing nothing. I think it will be more costly, more complex, but it also limits your ability to drive innovation for your business, for your customers.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. We're just about at the end of the today's webcast, so really that just leaves me to thank Andrew and Craig for fantastic presentations. Thank you to HP for sponsoring this session. For the attendees, at the end of this webcast, there will be an opportunity to please take a short survey, which you can either find now on the red survey widget, or which will appear at the end of this webcast. There are assets and resources for you to download, as I described earlier. You will receive an email shortly telling you how you can access the on-demand version of this webinar, which includes the full slide deck. You can access this through the website also, which is www.business-review-webinars.com. That really takes us to the end of today's webcast. We do look forward to sharing further webinars with you, so please keep an eye out on the website just mentioned for more business review webinars, or visit Twitter at BRWebinars for daily updates, and join further business review webinars, and join the LinkedIn group, and please keep up with all of the latest from HP on cbronline.com, and click on New Style of IT, I beg your pardon, which is the microsite which is hosted for us. So that concludes today's webcast. Once again, thank you to HP, thank you to Craig and to Andrew, and most of all, thank you for joining us, and goodbye.